Welcome to episode number 55 for the National Land Realty Podcast, where we discuss all things land. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Mac Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty. I'll be your host for this episode. Soybeans are the largest United States agricultural export. The United States is second to only Brazil on the world stage as being the highest producer of soybeans. In 2022, the United States exported 57 million tons of soybeans, valued at $34.37 billion throughout the world. These amazing numbers are just a small piece of what we cover today with Charles Hall, executive producer of the North Carolina Soybean Producers Association. In this episode of the National Land Realty Podcast, we introduced listeners to this amazing commodity, how it's used, where it grows, and how organizations like the North Carolina Soybean Producers Association advocate for agricultural producers on a daily basis. Now sit back and enjoy. I'm sitting here with Charles Hall. Charles, you were the executive director of the North Carolina Soybean Producers Association. So give me a brief little intro. Like, how did you get into this particular position, and you know, what do you all work with?
Yeah, great. It's great to be here, Mac. I appreciate y'all having me on board. I got into soybeans because I was an international marketing specialist in agriculture, and I marketed a lot of products. Some were branded products, food and beverage, snack foods, things like that. But I got really familiar with a lot of farmers. And then through my farmer contact, I got into the association world, which is actually a pretty big universe of national and state commodity groups. So pretty much every set of growers in America has their association. And some are quite significant. So we are the North Carolina Soybean Producers Association. We're also the state affiliate of the American Soybean Association, which is our national grassroots organization. Then also soybean farmers have an assessment on their product. So it's a voluntary assessment that they use for marketing purposes. And we're also the board in North Carolina that administers that assessment. So that goes into marketing and promotion and research.
Got you. And so this just happened organically. You mentioned that you were working with food before. Was it aligned with agriculture, or it sounded like it was almost kind of with retail? So I was curious.
Yeah, I worked in government, and we did promote and market a lot of consumer-ready products, certainly. They're all agricultural products, so they're all made from agricultural ingredients. But some of them were, things that you're very familiar with. So I'm just thinking something like Slim Jim. If you remember Slim Jim's, the meat snack. Obviously, it's made from beef, so it's an agricultural product, but it was a branded, labeled product that we actually promoted stuff like that overseas, so all around the world. But we also worked with commodities, apple, poultry, meat, pork, meat, things like that are not consumer ready, not necessarily a branded product.
Gotcha. Okay. So, working with soybeans now, it's always good to discuss anything agricultural kind of in this podcast. I love the topic. What are some interesting things that we should know about soybeans in the U.S.? It's not, it gets attributed to U.S. agriculture, but it's not discussed as widely as everyone hears about corn and wheat and things like that. And you hear a lot of those. How much is North Carolina producing in terms of soybean crops, and how does that relate nationally?
Yeah, so soybeans is a bit of a conundrum. When I talk to my growers on my board of directors, if you ask them what's your favorite crop, they're going to say something else. They're going to say my favorite crop's corn, or my favorite crop's cotton, or it's tobacco. So soybeans never is mentioned as everybody's favorite crop. But I guess the paradox is it's the number one U.S. agricultural export. In North Carolina, it's the biggest acreage crop. It's got the biggest footprint. And it's a great source of nutrition for livestock. So when you're consuming poultry or you're consuming pork, you're really consuming soy protein because those animals or fed on soybean meal. So real quick about what soybeans actually are. Soybean is an oil seed. So it's not like corn. You know, when you grow corn on your farm, you take corn to the feed mill and the feed mill can process it right there into animal feed. Soy's a little different. Soy's composed of oil. It's about 20% vegetable oil, soybean oil. And the other, 80% more or less when it's processed goes into soybean meal, which is the ideal terrestrial protein for a lot of things. I mean, it's the preferred terrestrial protein for feeding to animals. So our biggest customers actually are chickens, followed by pigs. And that holds true in the U.S., in North Carolina, and around the world. Our customers are animals, let's say. So I guess my point being that with the soybean, it has to be processed first to get that compositional value out of the crop. So it's processed, and then the oil, the veg oil, goes into one channel. And, the dry component, the meal component, goes into another channel. So the meal, that's what's rich in protein. When it comes out of the processing plant, it's, our meal here in North Carolina is around 48% protein.
Gotcha. Okay.
Really ideal for feeding a pig or a chicken.
So when I'm saying that too, like in talking about it, you've heard more about soybeans in the last, let's say, 20 years. Is it the case that the crop has grown, or just it's been discussed more? Because
in recent years, it's a big acreage crop in about 30 states in the U.S. So the biggest growing areas are the I states.
Illinois, Iowa.
Yeah, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, and then, Michigan, Minnesota, the Dakotas, believe it or not. So in recent years, with improvements in genetics, improvements in the seed technology, we're seeing more and more soy being grown further north than it ever was. So creeping into the Dakotas, and probably in 10 or 20 years, it'll be going into southern Canada. That's all because of seed technology improvement, and that's really accelerated. But I mean, historically, I'd say soy in America is a 20th century crop. It really started to boom, I don't know, sometime after the Second World War in terms of the footprint and the infrastructure we see today. So the big corn soybean rotations out in the Midwest, the supply chain that goes down the Mississippi River to the port of New Orleans, or goes by rail to ports on the upper West Coast.
Gotcha. As a group that's an advocacy group, you have a lot to do with, you work with lobbying, you work with probably local agricultural producers and stuff. Talk to me about sort of like the primary goals of your organization and sort of how you all function.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we've really got two functions. One is we take this sort of a self-assessment, this voluntary assessment that farmers charge themselves. So I'll tell your listeners what the rate is. It's 0.5%. So when a farmer sells his beans, whatever that first point of sale is, there's a withholding of 0.5%. And that money, according to federal law, it goes into research, which we do. We fund research at land-grant universities and with private agronomists, all to improve yield and quality. So one of our major goals is improve the crop statewide in North Carolina. Another part of that money that farmers voluntarily assess themselves goes into market development. So attain market access for our member growers. When you get around to the policy side, we definitely work in policy. Unfortunately, we're not able to use that grower self-assessment funding for policy. There's a prohibition on using that money for lobbying, but we've got other sources. We do fundraising. So ensuring a favorable policy environment, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or the state capitol. Then we've got a pretty big, public facing operation here. So cultivating a positive public image for farmers really become important. We kind of call that the license to operate. Farmers need to maintain that social license to operate. So when a member of the public sees the product or sees the practices, whatever they are, they say, okay, I understand that, or at least it doesn't raise alarm bells. And finally, just, we have a goal to perform like a world-class organization.
Yeah. And so, tell me a little bit about, you mentioned that soybeans take up, when it takes up a lot of land, right? Like it's a crop that requires a lot of land. Tell me a little bit about what's different about it from other commodities. If someone were exploring the option, what they would want to look for. You mentioned being in the Midwest. What's the ratio of water that required for the crop as opposed to other crops and things like that? I'm very curious about sort of what's the exploratory on that.
Yeah, so it's a very versatile crop. It's a very resilient crop. And North Carolina is a great example to demonstrate that, because we have so many different environments and soil types just in the state of North Carolina. So if you're not familiar with us, we're basically from the mountains to the sea, right? We've got everything. We've got higher elevations. We've got zero elevation. And farmers here grow soy on really good soil and kind of good soil and some pretty poor soil, and it performs. So thanks to the improvements in seed genetics over the years, you can find a soybean variety that's going to grow pretty well wherever you are. So if you're a landowner and you're farming or you're leasing land to farmers, chances are that there's going to be a soybean that is well adapted to that local environment, meaning that the farmer's going to be able to plant it and be profitable. Now, I mean, there's some parts of America, they just don't grow a lot of soy. And the desert Southwest is going to be one of those places. But if you're looking at the East Coast, the Corn Belt, the upper Midwest, up through the Dakotas, there's soybeans that are genetically adapted and proven to really do well up there.
So if someone was looking to rotate out of a current crop and into soybeans, what are sort of the steps that they would want to take?
Well, I think your first step is to get a good agronomist, a certified crop advisor or an agronomist. They're all over the U.S. wherever farming occurs. They may be independent people or individuals working in their own businesses, or if you have a seed dealer or you have a crop input dealer, somebody that's providing your crop nutrients and your crop protection products like your pesticides and your herbicides. Those people have agronomists on staff that are there to advise you. That's their whole purpose is to advise you about how to get the most out of your crop. So that's a big way that farmers get the latest advice on the technology and the products. And it's gotten really, really high tech in just the last few years. I mean, we're seeing a change to much more automation, use of big data, use of digital mapping, so that we're putting things just where we need them, like a pesticide product or a nutrient product. We're able now to go in and pretty much put it right on target. And if we don't need it over there, we're not going to put it over there. So it's become so efficient. It really pays, for farmers to have a good source of advice.
Oh, absolutely. And setting up setting up contact with processing, your sort of supply chain for it is most states, likely have, soybean processing or access to. What's a way that, if someone is exploring, again, like rotating out of a crop and into this, how would they set up their distribution network to get that product to market?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So the soy supply chain basically goes something like crop is produced on the farm, and then it generally is going to go to either a local elevator, or if you're near a big transit artery like the Mississippi River or the Ohio River or something, maybe it's going to go to a big elevator on that river where it's going to be loaded into a barge. But at some point it's going to get on a truck, it's going to go to an elevator. From that elevator, it's going to go on another truck or on a barge to somewhere else, maybe a processing plant. or maybe it's going to go down to New Orleans or Long Beach and get on a ship and go to an overseas customer. To summarize all that, the farmer is a price taker. So it's a commodity crop. It's a big volume, low margin crop. The farmer is going to get paid on whatever the market says that day. So if the futures market says the price is this, the farmer's probably going to get that plus a little more depending on where he or she is, or maybe minus a little more depending on where he or she is, just based on how much that local market's calling for soybean. So really, the farmers just got to have a way to transport it, harvest it with a combine harvester, load it into some conveyance and get it to that first point of sale. You can engage a trucker to do that. You don't have to do it yourself. So soybean farming actually can be quite simple. It's not very labor intensive. Really, you can even hire out your planting. You can hire out your harvesting. It's something a landowner could conceivably do without a lot of employees and without a lot of equipment.
I got you. Okay. What's the biggest concerns with soybeans as a crop when it comes down to, say, for a landowner, engaging in or taking on soybeans as a crop?
Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking of going into soy, I mean, one thing obviously to think about is just, it's a big volume, low margin commodity right now due to global events, due to, the post-COVID situation, the war in Ukraine, whatever else. The cost of inputs has been pretty inflated the last few years. So if you're thinking about...
At Casper, we love sleep as much as you do. That's why we're bringing back the very first bed-in-a-box millions love at a price everyone will love. Meet the Casper. Shop online or visit a Casper sleep shop near you today. Casper, for the love of sleep. Exclusions apply. See casper.com/promo.
Your nutrients, the soil nutrients that make the plant grow, that's something you buy and put in your crop. If you're thinking about the pesticides that protect it from insects or funguses or weeds, all of those things rob yield from the soybean, and you got to control those and suppress them. Costs money. So all of that's been inflated in recent years. That's one thing to think about. I think another thing to think about, though, is the fact that it is a versatile crop. It doesn't have to be irrigated, for example. It grows very well on dry land. It doesn't take a lot of management like some other crops. I think corn is probably requiring more management. Cotton requires more management. Soybeans, you can get a pretty decent return on soy with minimal management, if you're efficient at it. And obviously, if you want to invest more management, you can really do very well with soy.
Yeah, I had corn in my mind as far as like asking, about other crops, just knowing that it takes a little bit more, a little bit more heavy touch, a little bit more like tons of water, right? Like corn's a high volume water crop. And so, and you said that soybeans don't require as much. They tend to function fairly well in I'm not going to say a dry environment, but a more dry environment than crops, say, for example, corn. So what are sort of like, are there certain blights that you have to keep your eye on with soy as opposed to other crops? Are the things that like specifically target soy that you need?
Yeah, absolutely. Like a farmer's going to tell you, it's always either it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too wet, it's too dry, right? So funguses and things like that, when you do get like into a colder, wetter environment, or you have a series of days or weeks where it's maybe below average temperatures and a little more rain than normal. There's certain funguses that do attack soy, and there's fungicides that you can apply, usually with really good results. So fungicides have been proven to help boost yield and increase yield in those situations. Insects, we've got insect pests just like every other crop does. The white-tailed deer, if you live in a state where there's a lot of white-tailed deer, they love to get out in your soybeans and eat them. Weather-related risk, there is always weather risk, so drought. Soy tends to do okay. You can purchase a seed variety that is better adapted for drought. It's been proven over a period of time and research to do better in drought than other varieties. Soybean also has a tendency to kind of lock down when the weather gets really, really hot. It stops growing, but it doesn't die, right? So it'll take some moisture and lower heat to turn the plant back on, but it's not going to be dead. It's going to survive it.
Rockstar Energy Punched, bringing a bold and unapologetic flavor packed with energy through a blend of B vitamins, guarana extract, and 240 milligrams of caffeine to fuel what's next. Rockstar Energy Drink.
So historically, soy comes out of China, right?
The wild soybean still grows wild in Asia. And we'd actually funded a university research project for a few years where they were going to Asia and getting this wild soybean, which is really difficult to recognize when you compare it to the plant we grow on the farms. And they were actually breeding it back in to see if they could come up with these, new genetic permutations that might have some benefit to farmers.
I was talking about how it's like became really popular. The conversation of soy comes up in the last 20 years, but the U.S. has been the top exporter of soy since the 1950s, which sort of puts it fairly prevalent on the world stage. As a crop, what would be appealing to soy for landowners as a potential crop, as opposed to other crops? You mentioned it as versatile. You mentioned that it can tolerate more extremes than other crops, or maybe less inputs. And you also mentioned the price of input. Does soy require more input than, say, other crops, or does it require less? Because it's been a thing over like you just said, fertilizer over the last couple of years has just gone through the roof, and other pesticides, things like that. So what would be the appeal of that as a crop?
Well, so soy is a legume. It's a nitrogen fixing plant. Another example of legume is peanuts. Peanuts is a legume. So one thing you cannot do is grow soybeans followed by peanuts, because they tend to have the same diseases. So that's that would be a no-no. But a lot of people in the Midwest rotate their soybean with their corn. So soy one year followed by corn the next year is a pretty common practice in the Midwest. Here in the Southeast, we do a lot of soy planted in May or June or even July, and harvested in September, October. And we'll come right back in with a winter wheat crop, literally planted the same day the soy's harvested. And so you'll get a winter wheat crop over the winter, harvest that maybe in June, and go right back with soy behind it. So that's a benefit to it. That wasn't your question. Tell me your question again. You were asking.
I would say, like, what would be the appeal of?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So because soybean is a legume, it's got these bacteria that live around the roots, and these bacteria actually take nitrogen from the atmosphere, and they fix that nitrogen in the soil where the soybean plant can utilize it as a nutrient. So it's called nitrogen fixation. It's just a benefit of growing soy. You just don't need as much nitrogen applied to the crop. Synthetic nitrogen, you don't need as much of that. Unlike corn, where you need quite a bit, soy actually can fix its own nitrogen from the atmosphere with the help of these bacteria. So that's one benefit to it. It generally takes less nutrients. You'll still need some crop protection products. You'll probably need some weed control products, but thanks to genetic technologies now, we've got several great chemistries that you can spray right over the top of the soybean. Won't kill the soybean plant, but it'll kill the weed. That's been the major genetic technology that's been introduced for soy over the years is resistance to herbicides. So herbicides kill the weeds, but they don't kill the soybean plant. Same time, we've also developed some weeds that are resistant to those herbicides, and that has become a bit of a problem. How do you deal with the weeds once they are also resistant to the herbicide? Then you got to either get another chemistry, or you got to do something mechanical.
Yeah, that's really the arms race, right? With between biology.
Yeah, it's an arms race of sorts. But the benefit of those genetic technologies, which are in the seed, right? They come in the seed, so the farmer gets that bag of seed. That technology's in the seed bag. We don't really plow the land anymore. I mean, we plant the seed directly into the ground without plowing it. And I know farmers that haven't plowed a field in 20 or 30 years. They literally drill that seed right into the ground. They don't disturb the ground. They don't turn the ground over. That's great for all sorts of things. It's just great for the biologics in the dirt. It's great for, carbon neutrality, all kinds of good reasons for that. And that's because of that herbicide-resistant seed technology.
Yeah, I was going to say, because soy has come up in regenerative agriculture, right? And you were just talking about, no-till, right? Where the act of tilling depletes the soil of certain things. Yeah. And when you take a product like soy that produces, brings nitrogen into the soil, it lends credence to the whole regenerative agriculture movement and how people are using it. You mentioned rotating it in with corn. How does it fit in with other crops in the rotation? Is there, you said, you don't want to pair it with peanuts. Are there other ones that it's friendlier to? Is there other ones you want to steer clear from in a rotation, or what's some of the dynamics of that?
Yeah, I mean, any legume, you don't want to pair two legumes in a rotation. So you wouldn't do soy and peanuts, but standard practice in the Midwest are corn, soybean rotations. That's just common. I mean, that's how it's done there. On the East Coast and the Carolinas, we have so many other crops, so many specialty crops. So we have tobacco, we have cucumbers, we have peppers, watermelons, everything you can think of. And soy works really well with just about all of that, especially, if you have fields where you don't have irrigation in place. Maybe your soil's sandier soil, doesn't hold water as well. It's a droutier soil. A lot of times you'll find tobacco on that land, and tobacco land can be rotated into soybeans.
Tell me a little bit how your organization advocates for the soybean, producers of your area in particular, because I know that you have a national network of, other groups. Tell me about just your state and how your team functions and sort of, how you represent the producers in your area.
Yeah, I think for producers and their landlords, or, if the producer is the landlord, the landowner, it's really important to pay attention to federal farm legislation. So there's this piece of legislation called the Farm Bill, and it's once every 5 years. And the Farm Bill is the legislative vehicle in Washington where what we call the farm safety net programs are voted on and funded. And for farmers and landlords, they're landlords or again, if they are the landowner, those programs, for example, crop insurance and the revenue protection programs, that really does provide that safety net. So if these markets get really volatile, so prices are going up steeply or falling steeply, it provides that safety net, which is going to mean there's going to be some income even in the bad years. That's really vital to farmers. A lot of farms, out of 5 years, they'll make money 1 year, they'll lose money 1 year, maybe they'll break even the other 2 or 3 years. So we go up there and we lobby for that legislation. We advocate on behalf of farmers for that. We need crop insurance. We need the farm safety net programs that are in the Farm Bill. And whether we're going out to Farm Bill hearings that happen locally, and if listeners in your network are landowners and they see that their congressman or their senators having a Farm Bill listening session, which are going on right now, because 2023 is the year the current Farm Bill expires, I'd encourage them to go sit and listen or bring their concerns. I mean, Congress wants to hear from rural Americans about what's going on, in the countryside. We certainly do that. We go up to Capitol Hill, walk the halls, visit the offices, and we work with our national affiliate, the American Soybean Association, which has a team of lobbyists in Washington.
Got you. And so, with that bill coming due, you were talking about income protection. And is that related to fluctuation in futures indexes, or is that related more toward, does that also incorporate, say, natural disasters, a freeze, something like that? Does it also protect against those things? And is that all wrapped up into the bill?
Absolutely. There's different products to protect against different things. There's products that can protect against, if the prices for whatever you're growing in your area get really low, if they tank. If you're enrolled in the program, you'll get protection. Or if you've had a couple really, really good years revenue-wise on your operation, the whole operation, and then you get some year where your revenue's just, it's just down the tubes. There's a program that will protect against that risk. With crop insurance, you've got protection against weather risk. If you have a hailstorm, if you have a hurricane. So there's a lot of different products that are out there, and depending on how the farmer wants to, put different pieces of that protection together, all of these options are funded ultimately through the Farm Bill.
It expires this year. Does that coincide with the voting of the next Farm Bill that outlays the next 5 years?
Yeah, so Congress right now is taking up this new Farm Bill, and they're starting to do the budget scoring and then look at the different programs. And hopefully they'll get one by the end of the year. So probably what's going to happen is this current Farm Bill will expire at the end of the federal fiscal year, and Congress will create a new one and hopefully pass it before January 1st. That's kind of the optimistic outlook.
What things are you looking at in terms of the new Farm Bill that's coming out that people should be aware of, new things that are being discussed to be introduced, and or things that are in there that should be amended?
Yeah, so the Farm Bill itself actually is a little bit about farming. It's a lot about human nutrition. So it's the legislation where all of the food assistance and hunger assistance programs reside. And that's actually the bulk of the money in the Farm Bill. The bit of money in there that actually goes to supporting farmers is honestly a pretty small percentage of the bill. That's why we focus on it so hard, because the cost for all the non-farming things have increased over the years. And it's sort of a zero-sum game. That stuff has gotten so expensive, it's hard to find more money to do the farm safety net programs. So we're really attuned to that, because again, if you're a landowner and you're leasing to a farmer or you're farming your own land, depending on how your leases are structured, for example, you may share in the risk to that farmer. So, you may have structured your lease so that you're entitled to a portion of the crop or a portion of the earnings from the crop, however you've done that. But these programs, provide that farmer the risk management to, get that crop in, get it out, and to keep on farming the next year.
There's just something about getting away to the Smoky Mountains. Step out on a hiking trail, zoom across a zip line, splash at water parks, shop till you drop, and say hello to the statue of our hometown hero, Dolly Parton. Discover the thrill of visiting the Smoky Mountains and reconnect with those you love the most in Sevierville, Tennessee. Learn more at visitsevierville.com. That's visit SEVIERVILLE.com.
So what's the relationship look like between, say, your group and your local congressman, or are you you mentioned you work with your national affiliates who lobby nationally, but so you're working mostly with like the North Carolina legislature. Are you in there, talking with them on the daily? Is this, what does that sort of dynamic look like when you're trying to influence sort of how people are legislating towards your crop?
I'd say with the federal side, we are monitoring it daily, just because, again, so many of these programs are federal programs. So the federal government's kind of taking the responsibility for this farm safety net at the local level or the state level. I'd say it's more on environmental regulation. And, North Carolina's done a really good job of looking out for the farmer and the rural landowner legislatively. but there's still things that have to be dealt with. EPA regulations that are implemented by the state regulatory authority. So we deal with that a good bit. It could be air quality, water quality. Like I said, our biggest customers are chickens and pigs. So we have a huge animal industry in North Carolina. We've got probably 1 billion birds, poultry, turkeys, broiler chickens, layer chickens.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw yesterday we've got around 8 million swine, down from about 10 million. So more or less one pig for every citizen in North Carolina out there somewhere. And that's our customer, right? And we want to maintain that customer. We don't want that customer to go away, because this creates a market for our soybeans right here at home. So when there's regulatory challenges to those industries, we're very, very sensitive to that.
Yeah. So is there anything current that sort of is influencing those things as far as legislation, negative or positive, against, say, poultry or swine?
Yeah, I mean, they're all regulated industries. Whenever animals are concentrated on a farm and there's inputs going in, there's outputs going out, there's regulations to maintain the cleanliness, the health, the safety, the environmental safety and quality, all of that. And that's kind of standard procedure. But we also get outside groups that target our state and target these industries in our state. And it may be people that, they've got ample resources and they have a particular social or political agenda, and maybe chicken production or hog production is not part of their agenda. So we have seen a lot of that money flow into North Carolina to negatively influence those industries. And because they are our customers, we stand with them,
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's another part, right, where you just don't think about that on the ready, where, that legislation or regulation or, something that's of hindrance to creating, a poultry farm or working with swine or something like that would affect, say, soybean producers, that there's, this, I want to say just a relationship between those two that are that strong that you wouldn't think about. Is it a matter of getting everybody on the same page? Do you work with those kind of groups? Do you work with, say, the Poultry Association, or, is that, I'm guessing you guys are in ready contact, I guess, is the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many levels. I mean, not to mention the technical level. So, providing the evidence of our nutritional bundle to their animal nutritionists, that's got nothing to do with politics, right? We do that all the time. It's just standard procedure again. But yeah, politically, those industries are targeted. They're targeted frequently and with big money that's often coming from out of state. They're targeted in the media and increasingly in the courts. So a lot of times it's not a legislative solution. It's a judicial solution. And there's cost to that. There's cost to the media campaigns and the lawyers and everything that happens there. So I think, again, if you're a landowner, ultimately it comes down to what's your right or freedom to, do with your land as you will, without having a court or a legislature, somebody telling you, well, you can't do this or you can't do that. Because somebody, from somewhere else has told us we shouldn't do it. Never mind the facts, never mind the scientific evidence, but we've kind of succumbed to this pressure. So I think it's a real possibility. And North Carolina has done a great job of protecting those industries to the extent that they do have freedom to operate. Our poultry industry is actually growing. Our swine industry is in a sort of a steady state. It's not getting any bigger, not getting any smaller, but yeah, for us and for all our, all the feed grains, whether it's corn, wheat for feed, soybeans, those animal industries, that's our customers.
Who are like your champions within sort of legislature that work with you readily, that you sort of go to? Are there certain, or I don't know if you could speak to that. Like, are there certain people that are like, that's my guy? or that's my gal.
Yeah, there definitely are. And I without naming names, I don't know if your listeners would even know some of the people in North Carolina, but there definitely are. There are people, for example, in our North Carolina legislative delegation that represent the rural parts of the state, represent a lot of landowners, a lot of farm owners. Maybe they serve on the House Agricultural Committee or had once served on the House Ag Committee. Those guys have been our friends, and we've been supportive of them. We have supporters in other states that broadly support our American soybean industry. So certainly there are senators, congressmen, and congresswomen that are our friends, and that we appreciate their support. Definitely in our state legislature, our state judiciary, even there's people that seem to understand and get it. That these are, at the end of the day, it's the rural economy, it's rural economic development, it's rural jobs. Our farmers aren't, they're not old McDonald anymore. It's not a guy in a straw hat with a red barn and an old tractor. I mean, these guys are looking for business opportunities every day, and they're adapting their farms to the latest opportunities and the latest technology. And I think
the technology that's been adapted in farming in just the last 20 years has been just through the roof, as far as like they're geo-coordinating their water and mixing it with solar and putting it onto a predetermined program system, and then running combines by GPS, and they're running themselves, and it's pretty amazing.
All of that, and I think the way we've adapted just to the changing political climate too. I mean, the burden of regulation has increased, not decreased, but in the last 20 or 30 years, the media scrutiny on where food comes from and what agriculture does and what farming is has changed. So most farms are family farms, which means that it's a man or a woman who probably grew up farming with the father. Let's be frank about that. It's usually they grew up and their dad was the farmer and they learned it from their dad. But their experience today is nothing like what their dad's experience was. I mean, the dad, if he was farming in the 60s or 70s or even 80s, it's just so different today. So, I mean, I think you've got to be very adaptable, but you really need to have some trust in your associations, the volunteer farmers that serve on the boards of directors, like my board of directors, that are volunteering their time to do these things legislatively or politically. That's really, really become vital to our freedom to operate.
So what's the best part about your job there?
Yeah, I used to say the travel back when I was an agricultural marketing specialist. It's just flying around the world and, visiting all these customers in places like, I don't know, like Vietnam and China and Romania. And so that was great. I mean, I love seeing our American products getting utilized in some other part of the world. It was just wonderful. North Carolina sweet potatoes, going over to London and seeing North Carolina sweet potatoes in the supermarkets, are going to the Middle East and seeing our soybeans feeding pigs and chickens in the Middle East. It's wonderful to see that happen.
What's the most challenging part of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you just got to understand that with farming and working with farmers, they're working every day for the most part. And when you're working with volunteer farmers, you have to understand that when they're doing something for you, it means they're not getting to do something else they need to be doing, whether it's work or spending time with their families. So it's kind of a challenge just to be cognizant of that. Their job is not a 9-to-5 job, right? Especially in the Carolinas where they do so many different things. That's a bit of a challenge. Really everything else is honestly pretty rewarding. I wouldn't say it's too challenging. I mean, it is, it's hard work, but it's very enjoyable.
So outlook for soybeans, futures, what is the outlook for soybeans? And this is, we're also talking commodities. It's like the single most volatile pricing index there is, right? It's just commodities in general, and you can't predict it based on weather and trade and Ukrainian wars. And, so tell me about, what sort of because I don't want to make you project it in the long term because you can't, But, in the short term, what's sort of the future's looking like for soybeans?
Well, so we haven't talked yet about renewable energy, but for soybeans, a lot of what the future is going to look like price wise and acreage wise, I think it's renewable energy. So soy is a feedstock, soy oil, right? The oil component is a feedstock for renewable diesel. And renewable diesel, it can be produced in a refinery, just like fuel made from petroleum products. It basically is the same chemical process. They're taking that oil and they're rearranging the molecules to make gasoline or diesel or whatever they make. So all vegetable oils can be treated that way and turned into fuel. And certainly soy oil is a prime candidate for that. What we're seeing is some of the big refiners partnering with the soy processors and announcing new soybean processing plants or expanding existing plants for the sole purpose of providing a feedstock for renewable diesel fuel. And there's another one coming that is called sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF for short. And if projections hold true, there's going to be a lot of demand for those products in the next 30 years. So there's going to be a huge call on the markets for vegetable oil, because it's a great feedstock to produce these renewable fuels. So that being the case, we're looking at an expansion in soy processing. That'll probably mean an expansion in soy acreage. And on the flip side, the price of protein ought to decrease, right? Because we've got all that soy meal. It's got to go somewhere. It ought to get cheaper for the people feeding pigs and chickens, frankly. That soy protein will be in abundance, should be getting cheaper.
So so some of the inputs for, say, things like swine or poultry could be coming down as the popularity grows and when you say renewable, is that sort of marketing spin for biofuels, how it used to be called biofuels?
We called it different things. We like renewable diesel. There's something called soy biodiesel, which is not a refined product. It's made in just a simple chemical reaction. But there's also renewable diesel made from soy oil, which is actually produced in a refinery. Right. So.
Gotcha. Okay. I was curious if it was the same thing or if it was a variance of. Yeah.
It's the same. So soy biodiesel is soy biodiesel, but renewable diesel made from soy is no different from any other diesel, right? It's the same. Or gasoline. They can literally rearrange the molecules, make whatever. It's the same. It's indistinguishable.
That's fascinating. And knowing that, the future of that is coming up, when I say it's coming up, it's probably in discussions right now and probably moving forward to make, those kind of fuels more affordable. What sort of challenges do you see ahead for yourself and your organization in representing, the growers of the country, and even at the national level, as we look forward to legislation coming up? Are there any particular headwinds that you were paying attention to specifically, or is it just remaining advocacy as you're moving forward?
Yeah, advocacy is certainly a big one. Marketing, again, we're the biggest U.S. ag export. So you're looking at probably 1 out of every 3 rows of soybean planted on American farms are being exported somewhere. Well, China used to be by far our biggest export customer, dwarfing everybody else out there. And then we got involved with a trade war, let's say. We had a trade war with China and we lost a good share of that market. It's come back. But, we need to look at diversifying our international markets. We can't put all our eggs in one basket. And we need, again, through the Farm Bill, we need the assistance with the marketing programs that are funded in that bill that allow U.S. agriculture to go out in the world and compete against, the rest of the world who are also out there going for those same markets, right? So we're attentive to that, and places like the Middle East, Egypt's a good customer for U.S. soy. The whole of Southeast Asia is a great customer. Everywhere where people's diets are developing and they're consuming more animal protein, those nations, those countries are going to be good markets for U.S. soybean.
Well, hey, I had you scheduled here for an hour. I don't want to, I try to be respectful of everybody's time. I appreciate you taking an hour to speak to me. I know that I know the world of the groups like you that look out for the interests of various industries, right? So I appreciate you taking the time to sit and chat with me.
Well, hey, Mac, if you're in the Carolinas, North or South, and anything we can do for you, give us a holler.
Man, I'm stopping in then. I'm just going to go in there and be like, dude, you ready for lunch?
Yeah, let me know. Look forward to that.
I like it. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, it's sort of like it is a topic. It's totally out of my depth as far as like soy is just something I don't know. So I appreciate you again being patient and bearing with me there.
Dude, you hit all the right things. You sounded like you knew it.
Hey, I can pull a rabbit out of the hat once in a while. This concludes episode number 55 for the National Land Realty Podcast, discussing soybeans, the United States' largest agricultural export, with Charles Hall, Executive Director of the North Carolina Soybean Producers Association. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com.